Nobody predicted it would happen this fast. For months, intelligence analysts, foreign policy experts, and military strategists debated whether Israel would ever actually strike Iranian soil directly. Not a proxy, not a warehouse in Syria, not a weapons convoy in Lebanon, but Tehran itself. The debate seemed almost academic. Surely, the argument went, even the most hawkish Israeli leadership understood that striking directly at the Iranian capital was a red line that would trigger consequences far beyond anything the region had previously experienced. They were wrong to assume Israel would hold back. And this morning, the world woke up to the reality that the threshold nobody thought would be crossed has been crossed. Israel struck Tehran. The details are still coming in. The smoke is still rising. The political and military fallout is just beginning. But we can already say with confidence that what happened in the past several hours represents a turning point in Middle Eastern history, and possibly in world history. The world that existed yesterday is gone. The world we're in now operates by different rules, different calculations, and different risks. The Israeli Air Force conducted a series of strikes on targets in and around Tehran, beginning in the early morning hours, when the city was largely asleep and its air defenses were operating at reduced alert levels. This timing was not accidental. Israeli military planners are among the most meticulous in the world. Every detail of an operation like this is gamed out months in advance. The targets, according to what we can piece together from satellite imagery, Iranian state media, which has been characteristically vague, and regional intelligence sources, appear to fall into three main categories. The first is IRGC command infrastructure, specifically the command nodes of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the military organization that functions as Iran's most powerful military and intelligence force, and the primary organization responsible for Iran's regional power projection. The IRGC has headquarters, training facilities, and command centers in and around Tehran, and several of those appear to have been struck. The second category is missile production facilities. Iran's ballistic missile program is centered around a network of factories and assembly plants, some of which are located in the Greater Tehran metropolitan area. Israel has been watching these facilities via satellite for years. Striking them doesn't eliminate Iran's missile capability. Much of it is dispersed and underground, but it significantly degrades it and sends an unmistakable message about Israel's targeting capability. The third category is the most significant politically: the headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps itself. If confirmed, and multiple sources are now suggesting it has been, this strike hit the nerve center of the organization that has been, for 4 decades, the primary instrument of Iran's efforts to destroy the State of Israel. The strikes appear to have involved F-35I Adir aircraft, Israel's stealth fighters, along with conventional F-15Is for the heavier strike packages. There are also reports, unconfirmed, of long-range cruise missiles fired from Israeli submarines in the Persian Gulf. The combination of stealth aircraft, conventional strike packages, and possible submarine-launched missiles suggests a layered attack designed to overwhelm Iranian air defenses by approaching from multiple vectors simultaneously. Iran's air defense system, the Bavar 373, their domestically produced answer to the Russian S-300, appears to have had mixed success. Some Israeli aircraft and missiles were likely intercepted. But the fact that we're reporting confirmed strikes on Tehran tells you that enough got through to accomplish the mission. This didn't come out of nowhere, even if it feels that way to people who weren't following the escalating tensions closely. 6 months ago, Iran provided a new batch of precision-guided missile components to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israeli intelligence detected the transfer. Israel struck the convoy while it was still in Syrian territory. Iran responded by launching a small drone attack against Israeli positions in the Golan Heights. Israel intercepted most of it, but 3 soldiers were wounded. Netanyahu gave a public speech warning that Israel would hold Iran directly accountable for attacks by its proxies. Most observers assumed this was rhetoric. It was not. 4 months ago, a senior Mossad officer was assassinated in an operation that Israeli intelligence attributed directly to the IRGC's Specialized Overseas Operations Unit. This was not a proxy operation. This was the IRGC directly killing an Israeli intelligence officer on foreign soil. The Israeli cabinet met in emergency session. The decision, according to sources familiar with the meeting, was made then. The next major Iranian escalation would be met with a response against Iran itself, not against its proxies. 2 months ago, Iran launched ballistic missiles at Israeli territory. Most of the missiles were intercepted by Israeli air defenses and American naval assets in the region. But 4 of them got through. One struck near a residential neighborhood in the north. 3 Israelis were killed. The Israeli cabinet convened again. The pressure from the military and intelligence establishment to respond directly against Iran became overwhelming. And then, 3 weeks ago, there was an additional incident that has not been fully reported publicly, but which multiple sources are now discussing. An attempted attack on the Israeli Prime Minister's residence. The attack was foiled by security services, but the connection to Iranian intelligence was apparently clear enough that it removed the last political obstacle to direct action. This strike, in other words, was coming. The question was always when, not whether. Iran's response to this strike is going to unfold on multiple levels simultaneously, and understanding those levels is essential to understanding what comes next. At the public level, Iranian state media and government officials are already making statements promising devastating retaliation. This is obligatory. Any Iranian government could not remain in power if it responded to a direct strike on its capital with anything that looked like restraint or acceptance. The rhetoric will be maximalist. Expect statements about wiping Israel off the map, about turning Tel Aviv into rubble, about the Zionist regime facing its final days. This is the standard Iranian public communications playbook. Judge Iran's actions, not its words. At the military level, Iran has several immediate options. The most obvious is a massive missile barrage against Israel, far larger than anything they've launched before. Iran has thousands of ballistic missiles of varying ranges and accuracy. A truly large-scale barrage would challenge even Israel's layered air defense system, which includes the Iron Dome, David's Sling, the Arrow system, and whatever American naval and air assets are in the region. Some would get through. Iran could also activate Hezbollah, a simultaneous missile barrage from Lebanon. Hezbollah reportedly has over 100,000 rockets and missiles. Combined with the Iranian missile salvo would create a 2-front attack that would genuinely test Israel's air defenses to their limits. The most dangerous immediate scenario is actually a combination of multiple tracks. Iran launches missiles at Israel, activates Hezbollah simultaneously, and conducts attacks against American forces in the region, on the theory that America either tacitly approved of the Israeli strike or actively assisted it, which may well be true. Striking American forces would raise the stakes enormously and would almost certainly bring the United States into direct military conflict with Iran. To understand why Israel made this decision, knowing full well what Iran's response would be, you have to understand the strategic logic that drove it. Israel's fundamental strategic problem is that it is a small country surrounded by enemies, and Iran has spent the past 4 decades building a ring of armed proxies around Israel's borders. Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in Gaza, armed militias in the West Bank, Houthi rebels in Yemen capable of launching missiles at Israeli territory. Iran has also been steadily advancing its nuclear program, and Israeli intelligence estimates that Iran is now within a relatively short technical window of being able to produce a nuclear weapon if it decides to break out. From Israel's perspective, the status quo was not sustainable. Every year that passed, Iran's proxy network grew stronger. Every year that passed, Iran's nuclear program advanced. The Israeli military and intelligence establishment concluded that the window for taking decisive action was narrowing, and that a decision to wait was itself a decision to accept a future in which Israel faced a nuclear-armed Iran surrounded by an increasingly capable ring of proxies. The United States is now in an extraordinarily difficult position. On one hand, Israel is America's closest ally in the Middle East, the recipient of billions of dollars in annual military assistance, and the subject of an American commitment to Israeli security that has been bipartisan for decades. Walking away from Israel in its moment of maximum military vulnerability is simply not something any American president can do politically or strategically. On the other hand, America did not choose this war. If the Trump administration knew this strike was coming, and there are conflicting reports about whether Israel gave advance warning, then America is now being drawn into a conflict it had not fully decided to enter, on a timeline determined by Israel rather than by American strategic planning. That's a deeply uncomfortable position for any great power. And then there's the practical military dimension. If Iran launches a major missile barrage at Israel, American naval and air assets in the region will almost certainly be engaged in helping Israel defend itself. That means American aircraft and ships firing at Iranian missiles. From Iran's perspective, that makes America a belligerent in the conflict, which means Iranian retaliation against American forces becomes, from Iran's point of view, not just possible, but required. We cannot discuss a direct Israeli strike on Tehran without discussing the nuclear dimension, because it is now unavoidably central to everything. Iran's supreme leader and senior IRGC commanders have made clear, in various contexts over many years, that they believe Iran's ultimate security guarantee must be a nuclear deterrent. They've watched what happened to countries like Libya, which gave up its nuclear program and was later attacked by Western forces. They've watched what happened to Iraq, which didn't have nuclear weapons when America invaded. Their conclusion, understandable from a pure regime survival standpoint, even if deeply destabilizing from a regional perspective, is that only nuclear weapons provide ultimate security. An Israeli strike on Tehran changes this calculus in a potentially catastrophic way. If Iran's leadership concludes that it has now entered an existential confrontation with Israel and its American backers, the rationale for maintaining even the pretense of a non-military nuclear program evaporates. Israeli and American intelligence will be watching Iran's nuclear facilities and personnel with extraordinary intensity in the coming hours and days. Any unusual movement of materials, any change in operational patterns at enrichment facilities, any signs that Iran is moving toward weaponization will trigger immediate contingency planning and potentially preemptive military action before Iran can cross the threshold. Wars in the Middle East are not just military and political events. They are economic events that ripple across the entire global economy. And this one has the potential to be the most economically disruptive conflict in decades. Oil. The Strait of Hormuz is now under threat in a way it has rarely been before. Iran has explicitly threatened to close the strait in the event of military conflict with Israel or the United States. Even a temporary closure, or even the credible threat of closure, could send oil prices to levels not seen since the early 1970s oil crisis. What does that mean in practical terms? Oil prices rising to $150, $200, potentially even higher per barrel. That translates directly into gasoline prices in America, Europe, and Asia that would dramatically reduce consumer spending power, increase input costs for virtually every industry, and potentially trigger a global recession at a moment when many economies are already under significant strain. The financial markets are going to react violently when they open. Expect massive volatility. Equities down sharply, at least initially. Safe haven assets, gold, U.S. Treasuries, Swiss francs, will surge. Defense stocks will be up. Global shipping is already adjusting. Insurance premiums for vessels transiting the Persian Gulf are spiking. Some shipping companies are already rerouting vessels away from the region, adding days or weeks to transit times and significant costs to supply chains. The international community is reacting with a mix of alarm, condemnation, and barely concealed strategic calculation. The UN Security Council is meeting in emergency session. Expect resolutions that go nowhere because of American and potentially British vetoes of any measure that would formally condemn Israel. European governments are in a genuinely difficult position. They've spent years trying to preserve the nuclear agreement with Iran, maintain diplomatic channels with Tehran, and simultaneously reaffirm their commitment to Israeli security. France, Germany, and the UK will call for de-escalation publicly. None of them have the military capability to play a meaningful role in what happens militarily. Russia will make statements condemning the Israeli strike and offering to mediate. Don't take the mediation offer seriously. Russia has been using Iran as a distraction for American attention for years, and a Middle Eastern war that consumes American military and political resources is profoundly in Russia's interest. China will be more genuinely alarmed than Russia, for the simple reason that China's economy is far more exposed to Middle Eastern oil. China gets about 40% of its oil from the Gulf region. A sustained disruption to that supply would hit China's economy very hard. Expect China to be more actively engaged in back-channel negotiations than its public statements would suggest. The world has changed. That's not hyperbole. What happened in Tehran in the past several hours represents a genuine watershed, the kind of event that gets a name in history books, that future generations study as the moment when the rules of the Middle Eastern strategic game changed forever. Whether this ultimately leads to a broader regional war, to a negotiated settlement that produces a fundamentally different regional order, or to something in between that doesn't fit neatly into either category, that we don't know yet. What we know is that the decisions being made in Jerusalem, in Tehran, in Washington, and in capitals around the world in the next 24 to 72 hours will determine the answer to that question. What you can do is stay informed, not just from a single source, but from multiple perspectives, including perspectives that might challenge your priors. The situation is genuinely complex. Anyone who tells you it's simple, that Israel was obviously right or obviously wrong, that Iran will obviously back down or obviously escalate, is selling you something. Complexity is not weakness, it's honesty. We'll continue to bring you updates as this situation develops, because it is not done developing, not even close.